All right. Welcome back to the Life Coach Lounge. This is your host, Leroy. I'm here today with a very good friend of mine, Shane. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Everyone, I'm Shane, a good friend of Keith.
Who's Keith?
Leroy, the Life Coach Lounge.
This is a very spontaneous and random podcast that we're doing here. And I appreciate you coming on here and doing this. And I want to ask you a question because lately we've been collaborating and we've been putting up some videos, creating some content, and you are my go-to guy right now for video editing, and you're putting together just these amazing videos. And I just want to hear a little bit about what that process has been like for you.
Super spontaneous, huh? Okay, well, yes, I've been putting together the videos. The process has been super exhilarating. I haven't edited in a while, actually. It's been, I don't know, I can't remember the last time I edited a video, honestly. Little things here and there, on your phone and whatnot, but this kind of style is something new for me. Um, and so far it's kind of just been a learning process, but I have an idea of what I'm doing, but this style and these new videos is just a consistent learning process as well. So
Mm-hmm.
it's both of them. It's like I have an objective, two objectives. My one objective is making a video out of the podcast and creating clips, and the other objective is learning new things as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a double objective.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard you say exhilarating. And that's a word you don't hear often, or at least I don't hear it often. But when you said that, I was like, oh, like I know what that feels like when you're just really excited about something. And and I know that you've been excited about these videos. Yeah, this learning process, this kind of you have this philosophy, no rules. Tell us, how does that play a role in creating these videos?
No rules is new. I'm not gonna
Okay.
lie. Ironically, when I say it's new, ironically, that almost embodies the idea of no rules. And for me, it's just another way of saying being genuine in your creativeness.
Mm-hmm.
And creativeness to me is literally just life in general, like how you are. It doesn't have to be creating music, it doesn't have to be creating videos or editing stuff. Being genuine and creative is just truly being authentic day to day
Mm-hmm.
in anything you do, even talking to people, even talking to strangers and stuff. Um, and that stuff and talking to strangers, that kind of stuff, that stuff was always harder for me to be authentic in, when it came to just being like social anxious or whatever. But when it comes to this stuff and I'm by myself and I'm expressing my genuinity through like video editing and stuff, that's definitely easier for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just know deep down, like it's truly there's no rules in a sense of like I'm not trying to I'm not following a script or anything. I'm not in school and it's like a project like, oh, you have to do this or that. It's like I have ultimate freedom. And that's what I've experienced these past couple of weeks, like being on the computer is just like I just go into it and I have no idea what I'm about to do. And I guess that's the flow state. I haven't even thought about that, but I guess it's the flow state because I just like it just comes out and then I end up with this product and I realized I was lost for a couple hours.
Yeah. So you acknowledge that there's this aspect of losing yourself in the moment and realizing later on that you've spent hours. What else is that flow state like?
You mean like what is it compared to? Or what is it like being in that flow
Just,
state?
just how else would you describe it besides that time aspect?
Um, for me, it's honestly, I mean, first and foremost, it just feels good.
Mm-hmm.
And then being in those states and stuff, it almost feels, here's what it feels like, honestly. It feels like moments where I felt like I was a kid.
Hmm.
And to me, that's honestly like my goal in life is to have more consistent moments like that of when I was a kid, because I feel like I was in the flow state a lot back then. And I think we all were when we were younger. And a lot of people say like that's just because we didn't have responsibilities and stuff. And I guess I do agree with that. But my, I feel like my goal in life these days is to get to that point. And maybe for me, that's trying to get rid of as many stressors in my life and eliminate those things and do the things I love to do. And that's one of these things here, editing your videos is, I was like, damn, this is one of those feelings again where just being creative and I'm putting together something.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you this the other day, but I've ingested so much material these days, like, and I love watching people on YouTube and I love watching people on social media and stuff that inspire me. But I was never doing it myself, even though I had these ideas in my head. So this is one of those moments where it sparked that again, and hopefully I can continue to do other things because I already have ideas. I want to like edit different videos now.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like taking on these projects is, if there was a small spark, it's turning into a really big flame. And it just seems to, it's like, what's next kind of thing is what it
That's what it
sounds
feels
like.
like right now.
Yeah.
It honestly does, because the same way I went into this stuff and the same way I go into each video is there to me. Yeah, they're small clips, but like it's totally different realm. And I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know like much about, like, I haven't edited stuff in a while or whatever. And in this case, like these kind of videos. So no rules. Like if I do something else and go into the same with the same mentality, like as long as I'm genuine with myself, I'm gonna be happy with like the finished product. And it's cool saying product in a way that's not to me just like about like money or anything like that. It's just a product doesn't always have to be that. It's a product. It's a finished product.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go in the same mentality and I put my no rule genuinity, authentic self into it, like it's gonna, and I know that. I always do that when it comes to like music and editing and stuff like that, because those to me are like some of the few things in life where they're not like ruined by society. Not
Oh,
society,
that's bait for me. I'm not gonna touch that one, but I
but
will.
society in general.
It's just like I have like jokes. I'm thinking
Yeah,
jokes, but then
yeah.
I'm also thinking about other things that I could talk about. But we're gonna skip over that one. But yeah, it's just cool to hear you talk about a creative process. I know you to be a very creative person. We've, you know, I haven't really like played a lot of music with you, but you have more experience playing instruments. I've seen you, I've heard the instruments you play, I've heard the music that you play. I think we were doing a lot of DJing together, so even just to put together like these mixes, you just have this creative side that comes out. And even when you're putting together a mix, you have your own style. And I think what I'm starting to notice too with these videos is you're finding your style. And I'm seeing that every video has like this blend of everything that you've been learning. And each one is the opportunity to play around with that and to like take these combination of elements of what you've learned and put them together in a different way. And every one has just felt fresh and new. And I think like the cool thing in having this podcast in particular is just to talk about also like what I feel like I'm learning in partnering with you in this project. Like to be partners, to collaborate. I'm learning a lot about myself along the way. I think one of the things that hit me really hard was about a week ago when we had a meeting and you just expressed to me, we were talking about like having these meetings as an opportunity to get things off of our chest and say like, how are we showing up? How do we want to work together? What do we want this dynamic to look like? And you said, I feel like I just need to know that you trust me. And I told you that, yeah, sometimes there's parts of me when like I know that there's elements that if I was creating something, the perfectionist in me, the inner critic would be evaluating it. And I've even looked at some of these videos that go up and it's like my mind just goes there sometimes. Like part of my mind is like, what could we do differently? Blah, blah, blah. But when we had that talk, I'm like, I do want to trust you. I think that's like maybe like it was such a like shift for me in that moment where I was like, I'm still going to have to deal with that on a personal level. But in order to trust you, I have to show that I trust you. And so I think I said to you, I'm going to give you the podcast. And when you hand me back the clip that you've created, that's exactly what's going to go up because I do trust you. And I feel like that was a way to show that. And moving forward, I want to stand by that. And I can't just kind of tell you enough how cool it's been to put that trust in someone, to really be a partner and just to let go of that sense of I need to control every little thing. You know, like I think there's this space where we meet in the middle where we're like, hey, this is what I'm bringing to the table. And you're like, hey, this is what I'm bringing to the table. And the stuff that you're doing, you know, creating the video, learning, developing your skills as a video editor, and then what you give me, I don't need to control all that. Like the whole point in partnering up is so that I don't have to do those things and that we get to work together and create something together. So there's been so much learning on my end too. Like, and you're just teaching me by way of being yourself. Like when we had that meeting and you said, this is what I feel like I need in this moment. I love that because I'm like, wow, I'm so happy that my partner in this project in this collaboration can tell me exactly what he feels and we can figure out what to do with that. You know, and if I felt differently about it, that would change things.
Yeah.
But I just, you know, kind of expressed how I feel about it and how I value this partnership. So it's like, yeah, I'm happy to put that trust in you. And it's actually teaching me a lot about trusting in other people. And also, another theme we talked about this a little earlier today is like I've been thinking about support and it's like how can I support someone, and it's like I almost feel like that falls into that category now is like in order to demonstrate that you support someone and like to show that is to trust them, right? And not to like take someone's work and act like one that you need to have control over it and two that your vision is any better or needs to be different, like what you're producing is great. And it's like I'm so happy to like kind of like honor what you said, what you brought to the table, and move forward in that way as a way to show like I've got your back. Like we're in this together and I trust you. And I just feel like I've been learning a lot from that. So I just think that's been really cool. It's been really cool to experience that.
No, and vice versa. I think that day was huge about communicate. Everyone always talks about communication in any, most of it's always in like a relationship or whatever. But to me, I start to realize like the word relationship is so much bigger than like what I'm used to hearing when I hear relationship. There, everyone has so many different relationships in their life. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
just a boyfriend girlfriend thing or whatever. But so like even communicating in our relationship when it comes to this partnership or whatever is huge. And for me, it's almost not easier, but like having those conversations when it comes to art, and the art in this case is like your whole life coach business and your whole life coach podcast, and then the videos I'm creating.
Mm-hmm.
That's all art to me because the reason why I'm a part of it and why I want to be a part of it is because I know that you're doing it with no rules, the no rules mindset. You're being genuine yourself. So it's something that I feel like it's easy for me to go because I'm kind of reluctant sometimes when it comes to like creating with other people, like whether it be music or this kind of stuff. Because if there isn't that genuinity, like reciprocated on both sides, it's so hard for me to like continue that because I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to like dilute those kind of things in my life that are the few things that still always give me joy, like music and at this case, like video editing. So I'll push away if I don't feel that's like reciprocated on both ends. So when I see your stuff and everything, and I already know that, like it's genuine. There's no rules. I keep saying it. So then it gives me that space, even though we have the conversation stuff, and it's good because there's still going to be those thoughts, or whatever. Like, and having those hard talks, it's an open space for that because we're both being genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when you can enter the flow state. And I know, like, I feel like you're in your flow state throughout this whole process, you know? And then that almost is like the more you do that, the more it's gonna trickle into your other aspects of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like I'm just trying to hone in on that and I mean the whole process though, of you asking me to do this and coming up with a schedule, I'm very disorganized in my life when it comes to stuff like throughout everything and procrastinator. So like having this timeline that we've been doing and getting into a routine and stuff, and for now who knows, it may change. Like that's the thing, we're open to changes, there's no rules, all this stuff.
Yeah.
So having some of that organization stuff and we're bouncing ideas off each other, it's been perfect. That does have like a ripple into the rest of my life because now I have something that's like in front of me. Like I got one goal each week now,
Mm-hmm.
whereas before I might be a little more shambled. So now I'm like, oh, I do have like something to look forward to that's like work,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that's just like the small seeds so far. It's been so quick. It's been so like it's been fast, but it's been very small sample. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just excited to see like where it's gonna grow to and everything. Even just
Yeah.
this spontaneity podcast right here threw me off, but you got me. Which is perfect. Which is
it was
perfect.
it wasn't initially my plan, but there's no rules. And yeah, yeah, I don't know. I think it's cool. I think what inspired this too was, the behind the scenes talk that we were kind of having about like an upcoming podcast and just kind of, just being transparent in terms of like what what I'm doing, who I'm working with, and like including all that in this and like documenting that and having you come on the podcast. And I feel like what I love about this podcast is if there is this element of no rules, then it's not like I just need to have coaches on there, or it's not like I just need to have a client come on and talk about their experience if they consent to that. It's I get to bring the person that I'm working with behind the scenes to create content on here. And we also get to talk about life, So it's there. Yeah, there are no rules, right? Like we can bring anybody on here and honestly, like we're already talking about, relationships, uh, interpersonal relationships, the dynamic of relationships. We're talking about communication. So we're hitting on all these things that are life things that are also coachable moments in our own lives where we can learn and grow from it. So it's so cool just to not limit ourselves to, and me limit myself to thinking, oh, I can only have coaches on here, and coaches or, clients are the only people that are going to offer value to the world. It's like, no, like you have so much to offer the world. And that's why I also think it's cool to highlight this part of our journey and what's happening behind the scenes. So yeah, I really didn't plan any of this. It is like incredibly like spontaneous and just it
It's
almost
what's
feels like a
it,
flow
it
state.
yeah, I was just gonna say it's ironically going with what we just talked about, being genuine.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be like perfectly sloppy and if you think about it. Like because being genuine sometimes is sloppy if it doesn't fit in like this what we're all used to, style, or like when you do this kind of stuff you have to do this or that, or follow this person. That's why there's so many like copies in the world of when you see people. But us being genuine, this is what happens, like this kind of stuff. And it's different. Even like when I just talked about earlier, like we came up with a schedule or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then this kind of like throws me off right here, and it's it's no rules. Like I keep saying that, but that's literally what it is. It's like
Yeah.
that is just genuine, being genuine to me and pure and authentic, and you can feel that. You can feel that with people. It's a
Yeah.
feeling. We talked about that the other day. It's like I don't know.
You
Yeah.
mentioned, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say like anyone in a world where anyone can say anything
Mm-hmm.
and you still don't know the source of where that's coming from, like you just trust. Trust is huge.
Yeah.
Trust is a belief, like, but it's just one of those things we talked about where like all you can feel someone's authenticity.
Yeah. And you can feel when they're not being authentic.
Yeah, and I guess someone would be like, "How do you know?" And I don't know. That's the one thing that I feel is like something I can feel sometimes. I don't know. That might be some crazy like spiritual belief, but
I
sometimes I
think
just feel
I
it.
th- I think we know. I think like this is always a great conversation because it's like, how do you know someone's being inauthentic? And it's almost like it is a feeling. Like I think we have like enough we usually have enough information, or like there's this gut feeling that what you're getting is not really the most genuine version of this person. And even if you don't know why you're getting a, I would say, like false version of this person in that moment, like if you can't pinpoint it, there is a reason. And it may not even be worth trying to figure out. It's just a matter of like just knowing that you feel that way and trying to like decide, like, do I want to interact with this person if it's going to continue to be like this, if I feel like I'm not ever getting the real version. Because that's a really weird place to be. And it's almost like when we talk about trusting one another, like if you can't trust someone, if you can't trust that you're getting the truth of someone, the real version of who this person is, and it could even come down to like when you ask someone if they like something and they say yeah, and you just have an inkling that like that's not true. It's like that doesn't sit well. At least it doesn't sit well with me. It makes me think like, what makes you feel like you need to say yeah in order to satisfy like me, or like or to appease me in this moment? Like if you don't like something, I'd rather know why you don't like it. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about why you don't like it. Like that's fascinating to me. Like for me, I'm curious. So I'm like, that leads to even, more diversity and more conversation, and maybe like opening my mind up to something different that they're hearing or seeing that I'm not. Um, but I do think there is this kind of gut feeling that tells us like, no, that doesn't really feel like authentic in this moment, especially when we're like interacting with other people.
It's almost, yeah, it almost uh that feeling is almost like your yourself becomes unauthentic because you don't feel like you're fitting into that space right there. If one person's off, then it just makes everyone all unauthentic.
I think that is like I did hear about like some research one time, which is interesting, is like how in a social setting, obviously, like when we're talking about inauthenticity and we're talking about communicating with other people and picking up on it, there is this sense of like, oh, if they're not willing to be themselves, how do I be myself? It's making me feel like if you're guarded, should I be guarding myself? Right? Like, and so all of a sudden, no one knows what's safe. Like, how vulnerable can I be if you're not able to be vulnerable and you're making me feel like I shouldn't be either? Like, why? Why are we not just speaking from a place of truth and being genuine as we kind of co-create experiences together?
And I think that's what it comes down to, though, is I don't think we've said that word yet, maybe, but when you said vulnerable, that's what it comes down to. I think it's hard to be authentic to me. Is like I'm authentic around like close people in my life that open that space for me and whatever. So my goal is to try to take that out into the world, and um, I mean, I can sit here and say like I'm definitely way better at that than I was, at every point of my life before now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a gradual, process. Um, but it sounds kind of cheesy, but like I do feel like it's when both take like a party of two, and when both of those people are authentic, like uh it's like whoosh, sprouts up into this creative juice spread, whatever. But
the,
it's so
the
much
creative juice spread.
creative juice spread. Get it at your local Walmart. You gotta really look. It's at the bottom shelf. It's not like up top yet.
Walmart does not sponsor this podcast.
Not yet. But I do feel like in those cases when someone's unauthentic and not being vulnerable, it's that just takes over the room.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why like in my life I'm trying to just be careful about where and who I'm with these days, because the more you get older, you're like, I don't want to, I want to be vulnerable. I want to get back to my creative roots as a kid, like because that to me is when like we all were kind of vulnerable and stuff like that mentality in a sense, or just like a kid like state of still being curious in this lifetime, even though we're older. And you know
Mm-hmm.
you might be like, oh, when you were a kid, like you didn't see that tree for the first time, you didn't know what trees. I get that, but like now we have the capacity in our brains to like that is different when we were kids. Like now we can bring curiosity back, and like you can look at a tree a different way. And I think that's what's cool. Is like you can still make it fresh these days. You just gotta be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought you were gonna say that, like it's maybe you did say it. Maybe I'm can't remember the full thing, but something about being vulnerable, which reminded me of just of kind of how Brene Brown talks about it. I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but just talking about like it can be difficult to be vulnerable, like, and she says like if you can be vulnerable, that's almost like a form of courage because you're really truly putting yourself on display for the world to see you for who you are, knowing that you will be criticized by people. People will try to bring you down, but that's not the full picture either. Is there's also going to be people that are really inspired by the fact that you show up that way. And there's going to be people that, you know, really appreciate that. And so you have like, the positive and the negative consequences of being vulnerable. And yet the point is to do it anyway. The point is that don't be afraid to hide who you truly are. And I was speaking to a friend last night and I was telling them it, it seems like the hardest thing to do in this world, like the actual most difficult thing, at least for me in my experiences, has been it's not the things that we enjoy doing that are difficult. Like anything that we decide to put our mind to, like doing this podcast, um, creating videos, learning something new, like whatever it is, playing hockey, doing those things is not really hard. Like you just show up and you do it, and over time you just kind of get better. You learn new skills. I almost feel like the hardest thing is the social aspect and like fear of trying new things. It's the fear of that criticism and judgment of being the presenter in front of the room. But the presentation itself is not even actually that hard. Like it's all the things that we do that we enjoy. Like when you go home and you're behind closed doors, and let's just say like I come home and I'm singing at the top of my lungs. It's like that's not hard for me to do. That's just me being myself. But then the hard part would be if you told me go sing at the top of your lungs in the middle of the shopping center where there's like 1,000 people walking around, and I'd be like, ugh. And so all of a sudden it's like the singing at the top of my lungs is not hard to do. It's the idea of doing it in front of 1,000 people. And I feel like when we can start to trust ourselves, when we can understand that being vulnerable allows you to show up as as you are and almost do the things that you love, regardless of anyone's judgments, the positive, the negative. It's just a matter of you being in this world, existing and doing the things that you love, and knowing that some people are going to praise you for it and some people are going to bring you down, but at the end of the day, you just have to do it for yourself. And I feel like that's my message to the world. I didn't know how to like stop that speech. Like I had to throw something in there,
Um,
but I was like, that was me wrapping it up though.
or do you want a number two?
You want fries with that Whopper?
You're just going off to the
Uh,
guy in the drive-thru.
I will say this. This is a very here and now moment thing. As we're having this conversation, I feel myself not caring what the world thinks about this podcast. And I don't mean that to say like, you know, it just doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, I'm doing this for me. You agreed to, go on here and hit record and see how long
Like
we
a
do
knife to my
this.
back. Yeah, I don't care.
So,
I don't care either because we're not gonna post it. No, I'm just kidding.
but my point is as we're having it, like, and we're talking about these things, it's like this is another step in the forward direction in terms of like my own personal growth and doing things just because I love to do it. And the reason that I do post this podcast out into the world is because I'm a part of this world and I'm connected to a lot of people. And this is me finding how I want to show up and be a part of the world and be of service to the world and connect with other people and offer something. And so at the end of the day, like I'm doing it for me, I'm doing it in that sense. But the podcast itself, like there are going to be people that are like, Life Coach Lounge, like who would listen to that? But then there's also going to be people that are going to be like, I'm so glad someone created that. And so at the end of the day, it's like, just do it for you and put it out there and just be vulnerable, right? Like just show up.
Like, that literally goes along the lines of what we said. Of it's easy for like unauthenticity. Keep saying unauthentic. It's a hard word to say, and I hope that is actually like a way to say it.
Inauthentic.
Inauthentic. You're gonna say that now?
I'm just letting you go, bro. You're good. Be vulnerable.
Un Unauthentic means to like de-authenticize.
Inauthentic.
Inauthentic.
Yeah.
Um, Unravel means like to unravel things.
Unravel.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
unauthentic would be like that's not, yeah, it doesn't work. Um, no rules. This whole vibe of like when it's that brings you saying that right there about like putting this podcast up and doing this stuff like is it's like you have to do that after especially our conversation we have. If you're not, then you just literally we just talked about that and now you're not doing that. And I'm not saying there's going to be moments where you're not. You're going to have it's tough to do those things. We all fall back into it.
Mm-hmm.
But like yeah, especially with the whole life coach thing and stuff. And the minute I even brought this up to you about like there's definitely people out there that see life coach lounge whatever and this label, and I've done it to different things in the world as well, where you see something, you just attach any type of experience you ever had in your life. It might be negative or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to these things, because it's like a label calling like life coach. I'm helping you out. But I
Mm-hmm.
think what I've told you is you're. I've always told you like no, you're super authentic and genuine, and f the label. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can't worry about that. You can't worry about whatever because now you're letting people that aren't being genuine make you not genuine. And now you're like, oh, we have to put up this kind of podcast. We have to keep doing this or keep doing that. You're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You kind of call yourself out there right now. You're like, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm not thinking as like I am in real life. I'm trying to put on this persona and do things that aren't doesn't feel natural. And that's kind of the conversation we had, recently. I told you I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I was getting lost in I have to make this kind of video or I've seen people do this and I have to make it because we want to get a lot of views and whatever. And then I'm like, hey, I'm just making stuff that I want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's like where I'm actually excited, because I've never been one to like want to like post for like attention or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I actually create something, I'm like genuinely like, dang, I love that. Just give me the best vibes. And it feels like me.
Yeah.
I feel so much better like putting that out to the world,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I
No,
know
it's
it's not me trying to cater to anybody.
yeah.
Myself, maybe.
I feel like like what you're saying right now too. I love that you brought that you know example up of like some of the conversations that we're having too, because like again, like we're just kind of pulling back the curtain, right? And we're saying like these are the things that we're dealing with. Like these are the things that we're being challenged by. Is we live in a world where everyone is counting the amount of times someone views something. There are all these analytics, and it does impact whether your video is seen or not seen. But I think when it comes to the creative process, for me, it's like having that conversation reminds me that when I set out to do something, the most important thing for me to remind myself is the why. It's not the view count. It's not how many followers am I going to get. For me, it's let's celebrate whatever happens. And let's also just, first and foremost, let's celebrate just the creation of whatever it is we do in general, because that is like creating something is not only an art, but it's also just something that just it's like there's like this meditation I was listening to one time. I was just talking about beauty. It's like sometimes it's just like it feels like the art that you create and you like when you put your heart and soul into it, it's something that's beautiful. It's something like regardless of the evaluations, the judgments, the criticisms, the art itself that you created, the thing that you spent time doing while you're alive on planet Earth, like that's there's so much meaning in that. And for me, it's like, let's celebrate that first and foremost. It's just that you and I and anyone else decides to put their heart and soul into something. That's the most powerful thing. And then when you realize that you're having a human experience and you throw that piece of art out into the world and people respond to it. And for me, it lights me up to know that people can gain something from some of the content that I put out there, from my life coach servicing or services. It definitely lights me up to know that people benefit in some way, that I can be of service to the world because I am a human being among many other people, and that it connects me to them and it allows me to impact them when I have the ability to think about what kind of impact do I have want to have on the world? Do I want to have one where I have a negative impact and I bring everyone down, or do I want to have a positive one where I lift everyone up, or at least try my best to do that with the work that I put out? So all those things and what you talked about are just great reminders of like just that creative process and like almost like how to exercise not falling or like getting too far away from that. Because I don't know if you've heard stories about like writers that can't write, like they get stuck, writer's block, or
Mhm.
like musicians that can't create more music. And it's like you lose touch with that sense of creativity. And I feel like what I was talking about initially, that sense of like the art itself that you're creating and the why behind it, that's the most important. I feel like that keeps me in that creative space as long as I can remind myself not to stray far from that, you know? And it's tough. Sometimes it's tough because you see the view counts and you see all these other things and people are giving you positive feedback and um, it's just tough, or people are bringing you down. It's like, oh God, should I be doing this? And you create all these questions. But I think if you just get back to your why, the art will create itself.
Yeah, worry about it's cool to look at those things. Like we look at them sometimes. If you put that before genuinely creating something you like, I just don't think that is the best way to go about it. I think that's, I mean, maybe for some people, but if you truly are genuine and make something you like and then you share it, you're gonna feel so much better when you see views. It's cool to like look at that stuff, because then you're like, dang, people actually are looking at something that I was happy to share. At that point you're just happy like to see if anybody else likes it, because if I already liked it, that's fine. That's all I need. Honestly, that's all I need.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to that kind of stuff, I'm just making something that I enjoy watching, because there's only one. I'm not, it's not, I was about to go off and I shouldn't even say this preface, but like, I'm not trying to sound egotistical, but like, there's only one me.
Mm-hmm.
So like, that's dope. I get to watch something I created,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. I think that's like what I was speaking to when I said like it's beautiful in a way. Like it's like this idea of um things in the world like beauty, meaning like this is something that's almost sacred, right? And like really thinking about it as, why is it important for me to take the time, the energy, the effort, and why I feel like I'm here and the time that I have to put it all into this thing and create it. And it's like it's sacred, it's beautiful when it's all said and done, and it's beautiful regardless of the criticism or the praise. It's beautiful. So yeah, this is such a cool conversation because I had no idea we were gonna go down this route, and I
Yeah.
love that there's now this like theme of being in this creative process, not losing your kind of like not getting too far away from your center as a way to maintain just that, you know, being really close to your why and like showing up and just creating just to create and trusting that, again, for me, if I want to have a positive impact on the world, I don't need to think about how many views I'm going to get on something. I just need to think about the kind of work that I want to create, and that will have the impact because of the intention behind it. So the intention is always to have a positive impact, right? If the intention was to have a negative impact, then maybe I'd be thinking differently about this whole thing. But that's not my intention. So I don't know. I don't even know how we got here, but I love it. It's
I
such
have
a
one
good
more thing to say
conversation.
that came up
Yeah, yeah,
to my brain right there.
yeah.
If, say there's people out there that are doing it for the views,
Mm-hmm.
in their head, they're like, all right, even if one person said, "Oh my god, I love this so much," then that's a success for them. If we just say it like that way, they don't. Some people might be greedy and be like, "Oh, I want two people or 200 people," but like, say if you're trying to create for other people and like, I want to make something that people like. Well, if one person liked it, then you succeeded technically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you reverse that standard and do what we just said earlier, if you create something that you like, then you already succeeded. Like, you already succeeded. Do it that way. And then the rest is just extra. But
Mm-hmm.
if you create something that you like, then you already got that one person.
Yeah.
You can't lose that way. You can't
Yeah.
lose.
Yeah.
And that's how I look at it.
You made me think also about, as we're talking more and more about whether we're trying to make something without thinking about any sort of like analytics or any sort of like reward or anything that we're going to get from it, is just like the passion behind it, the intention. And I feel like I lost my train of thought. Oh, I know what I was going to say is if, like, for me, it brings me a lot of joy to do all the things I'm doing, regardless of the reward. Like, no, like, there's no sort of like monetary value that is motivating me. Like, there's no sort of intrinsic motivation to get me to show up to do this podcast today. Like, I'm doing this because I genuinely enjoy to do it. And I think what ends up happening too is, and I'm just arguing a point, right? I'm just arguing a point that what we're talking about and where we're coming at, like the standpoint that we're coming from is, I don't want to depend on everyone else to determine how happy I am about my work, right? Like, that's going to come from me. And I know that I can improve my work over time, and I can think about the style that I want to create. I can, there's so many things that I can do on my own to grow and develop over time, whether it's in creating art or whether it's in becoming a better coach. But at the end of the day, like, again, if I stray far from my why, and if I stray far from like just doing this from an, intrinsically motivated place, which is I'm doing it for me because I feel like there are strong beliefs that are guiding me that I'm having a positive impact on the world by being authentic and being genuine in my nature, then I don't need everyone's view counts to determine like whether I'm happy, the joy. It doesn't like I don't need it, right? Like it's icing on the cake for me, basically. It's like because I'm a part of this world, it's icing on the cake, but it's got to come from like I got to be happy about what I'm doing first and foremost. You know, I can't let other people dictate my level of happiness, you know? So,
Because if you are creating for other people, if that's your sole reason and you're worried about views and you're doing it for that reason, imagine putting it out there and you don't get a response. Now you're
right,
like,
crushed.
you don't like it and other people don't like it. That's worse. So that's what I'm saying is like you create for your own self and you enjoy it, then you always have that. Like I love I know I don't know, I love that. And I need to get better in my life of not saying like not trying to sound egotistical or whatever. But like if I create a mix, like that mix, I love going back. It's like a timestamp of who I was in that moment. Like I love
Mhm.
listening to it because I know I was being genuine. I know I was being genuine and just like putting together something in that time frame. And it's a like I said, a timestamp of music that I liked in that moment.
Mhm.
And I wasn't doing I was doing it because I genuinely like wanted to make a mix. Same with his videos. I'll sit there and watch all of them like at the end and just be like, dang, it was a couple of weeks ago when I did that one. Like and I remember that times like my headspace I was in and being lost in that moment.
Mhm.
I love watching things that I create and listening to things that I create. Like I need to be fine saying that.
Mhm.
But that's the truth. I do. I love it.
Yeah. No, it's
Because it feels like it's like almost my own it feels like journaling or something or like my own therapy.
yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, I don't think it sounds egotistical. I think it's kind of right in line with what we were saying earlier, which is like just being happy to create it for yourself first and foremost, and just knowing that when you put it out in the world, the world will respond the way that they want to, but at the end of the day, like, are you happy to be doing it in the first place? You know? And yeah, no, we've been on here for a little bit, so I'm gonna
let's
try and
wrap it
wrap
up.
this up. Yeah, yeah. But once again, I appreciate you coming on here doing this. Uh, I think it's really cool where this conversation went.
Yeah,
I
I got
like this
lost.
kind of like, yeah, like, I feel like I was getting really almost passionate about this kind of discussion around creativity and us working together and we're learning things along the way. So if there's one thing that, I keep reinforcing and emphasizing over time about this podcast is that everything that we're doing in our lives, there's something to learn from. And I don't mean that we need to stress ourselves out and say, like, oh my God, I've got to pick apart and analyze every moment of my life. It's like, no, like fall into your moments and go with the flow and do your thing and try to just enjoy the process. But there are things that we can learn along the way. So at, various points, just like in this podcast, how we talked about communicating with one another, like being in this new space where we're learning how to work with one another, which we've never really done this way. And you talked about like, now we have a schedule and we're kind of like learning things. We're learning things about each other, about how we show up, as partners for this project, and it just continues to evolve, and there are certain things that we can pick out every once in a while and say like, hey, let's talk about this. What can we learn from what we did here? Like we now know what it's like to not have any structure, and we now know what it's like to have a type of structure where we feel balanced and like it keeps us accountable, and it works for now. So we do it, and maybe later on that will evolve, who knows? But the point is that we're learning along the way. We're learning as we go.
I love it. We're open to we're open.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're open to changes.
And there's no rules.
No rules.
No rules. All right. All right. No, thanks again. I appreciate you coming on here.
Appreciate
Yeah, this was friggin' awesome. And I'm gonna post this with or without your consent.
it.
No rules.
Let's go.
All right, we're out.
Peace.